And at this time, I'd like to hand it over to Rachel to introduce tonight's speaker.
Good evening, everybody. It's good to see so many of you join us. I know that Hurricane Ian was quite a challenge, but overall, I'm happy to see so many people and that nobody was too badly affected other than some repairs you might have to make. So thank you again for joining us tonight. I know it's been busy getting back to our to-do list and our new to-do list with Hurricane Ian. So tonight we welcome Meghan Meyer. Meghan Meyer is a first-generation Floridian and has lived on both the Gulf Coast and the Atlantic. She has a bachelor's degree in wildlife ecology from the University of Florida. She also has her master's in forest resources and conservation. Meghan began her position as land manager with Sarasota County 2 years ago. Being outdoors always brought her enjoyment. Her passion is prescribed fire and restoration. Meghan, we are ready for you.
Thank you. Let's do, how do I share my screen? Is there a way to share the screen?
I think I just released it for you, so
Okay.
Try again.
There we are.
Okay.
So I created a quick little PowerPoint. It's more open-ended with some basic information because I figured you guys would probably have lots of questions and I'd rather answer your questions geared towards whatever your interests are. So I'm going to talk about using good fires and the occasional bad fire. I didn't realize we were doing an introduction, so most of this has already been covered. I started my career off at Camp Blanding as an intern doing gopher tortoise transects. Realized I was terrified if I was going to hate the outdoors, if I had to work in the outdoors all the time. And I found out that all I wanted to do was camp the whole time. I was walking miles in the woods. So I realized I found the right job. From Blanding, I stayed there for about 3 years doing whatever job they could give me, odds and ends. I moved to Talbot Islands State Parks, up in Jacksonville, did that for 10 years. I was a park biologist. It was a very amazing job, which led me to Sarasota County, which I equally enjoy, if not more. I've legally been playing with fire since July of 2007. I've been part of about just over 200 burns, prescribed burns, 22 different wildfires, and I've instructed 30 plus classes, which I realized over the years was also a passion of mine, is talking about fire. So I tried to make this a quick and brief conversation to answer your questions because I could talk about fire for hours. So with prescribed fire, even wildfires, the big questions we get are, why do you burn and how do you burn? So the big why is it's going to happen. Florida is meant to burn. It's the climate, the geography, the culture, the past cultures. Florida was adapted to burn. It has changed the landscape, all of the different aspects of these three. So we're all aware, lightning, capital of the US. Most fires are either started by lightning or they're man-made, sadly. But lightning fires were what was causing most of the fires back in the day. Native Americans utilized these lightning fires to move, maybe if they were more nomadic, they would move towards them. And this is across the US, not just Florida, but in Florida, they definitely would start fires. They learned that when they started fires and it burned out an area, then their communities were protected. They weren't apt to burn again for a few more years. And it also made it easier to see competitors, and it would draw in different wildlife species and propagate different flora species. Many years after that, early Americans and Spanish started bringing in their cattle, and they still to this day, even in Sarasota County, they burn for forage for their cattle. Not why we burn, but it's still being used for different practices. Some of the ecological effects that fire has on, I'm going to kind of break it down. So we'll start with water and hydrology. This background picture is, I'm standing on one side of a wetland, so those grasses are actually supposed to be a wetland. And then you see that herbaceous or the shrubby edge where the fire is actively burning. So what fire will do in the short term, it will actually alter the percolation rates. It may actually create water to go further into the aquifer faster. It percolates, doesn't set, it will release that that layer where the hydrophobic layer. It also will create evaporation faster because now the soil is exposed to that sun. So you'll draw down your wetlands a little faster. It can cause surface runoff if it happens to fire happens to get into like the muck layer or that duff layer and burn down in these little fingers, and it'll allow water to run off and maybe avenues it didn't prior. But all of this is determined by the post-burn rainfall. It's very short term. If you've ever seen where we have done a fire, the grasses and the forbs, they're regrowing within a week, 5-7 days, they're already starting to pop up. So it's very short term. The long-term effects, which are actually more important in my opinion, are it prevents that organic buildup. You can see in this picture in the back, there's just a lot of grasses. There's really no open water. So as they die, they create thatch. The reason they're really brown is because this was post our frost event we had this year. So they were a little bit more apt to burn than they probably would have been, which I think was great because we kind of opened up some more open water in our wetland areas and allowed some other species to kind of regrow, kind of take it over.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right.
And then sometimes it'll, depending on what kind of wetland or where the hydrology effect is, it will affect recreational events. Fire also has an effect on our soils. It will overall, it increases the nutrients. I mean, think of potash is something you would add to your garden. We're kind of doing that in a different way by burning down the top vegetation and adding all those nutrients back into the soil. Again, the soil is exposed, so this allows different seeds to be able to germinate or to achieve germination because they can now reach the soil. And there's a quick, very slight pH elevation during its short term, also dependent on post-burn rain events. Plants, I have a lot more about plants because I figured that's what you guys had more interest in. So the big things that fire is affecting on plants, it really depends on the intensity of the burn. The faded picture in the background, that's more of an intense burn. It was very hot, that's why I'm standing farther away for this picture. That's scrubby flatwoods, which you can kind of tell by the soil color. So it's a more intense stand replacement type of burn. The seasonality of the burn will also affect the plant recovery. If we burn it in a dormant season or what would normally be called a winter burn, we're not really having any effect on the hardwood species because they are dormant. They're not, the top, all we're doing is just removing that top growth, which is already dormant anyways. And you're burning off your grasses, but you're not actually affecting their fertility. You're actually negatively affecting their fertility. The main reason we would burn off season or winter dormancy is either we're doing restoration burns, we're trying to get fire just into that ecosystem and remove a lot of dead, built up material. Sometimes it's just a matter of where it's at. Places like Lemon Bay Preserve, the winds are in our favor to do it during that season. So sometimes it's unfortunate that you're stuck that way, but it's better for the environment to burn it than not to burn it. And then also post-burn plant competition. Palmetto will recover really quick, where some other herbaceous species are a little slower to recover and will quickly be outcompeted. Exotic plants will also recover pretty quickly. That's why they're so invasive. They're able to regrow faster than some of the native species. So if you're using fire to remove exotics, you need to be prepared to follow up with some other form of treatment. And then weather, if we're burning and it's really humid and it's not an effective burn, kind of ties into that seasonality and that intensity. you might not get that top kill that you want. Scrubby flatwoods or that scrub won't burn if it's wet. Barely wants to burn when it's cold. And I think it's on my next slide. Yeah, where I kind of talk about the fire effects. So this picture I stole and I credit it. This is from Florida Panther National Wildlife Refuge. I've taken many before after pictures, but never ones that captured such a large landscape like this. So this is a prime example of a pre-burn within 1 week post-burn, and then that bottom picture is 2 months. So within 2 months, you can see the cabbage palm are already like, they're not affected at all by the fire. All of the different hardwood species, looks like gallberry, some Lyonia, they're all coming right back. And even the pine trees, which you can see in the background, which were a little affected, they're browned out needles here and there, they're already recovering within 2 months. So it's pretty cool. Before and after pictures are the best, especially if you're ever applying for money, if you could show what your work is doing for the benefit of the ecosystem. So other things everyone always asks, not a lot of people ask about the plants. They always ask about the animals, the fluffy, furry, feathery animals. Most of the animals in Florida are also adapted, much like the plants, to fire. Depending on the frequency and the seasonality and the size is what will happen, will determine the effects per that animal species. It's hard. In these 2 pictures, there's actually animals. I don't have a laser pointer. So the little tiny skinny picture, if you look kind of dead center in it, there's a little gray dot or speck. That is actually a gray catbird that was following me around. This is the immediate day after a burn in that same scrubby flatwoods picture from a couple slides ago. And it was following around, picking up all the different bugs that were still hopping around. And then the larger picture, there's a whole flock of turkeys that just did not show. In a bigger picture, it shows up better. But they go around, and just like deer, they'll start eating the ash for the nutrients, and the turkeys, quail, they'll start picking away at different bugs that are present. I've been on many burns where the swallowtail kites, they see your smoke column and they come and they just start eating away at all the grasshoppers. They've learned that fire equals grasshoppers. It's pretty cool to see, and gets very distracting for newbies. What do I have here? So so for prescribed fires, like I said, we have that moonscape, or we call a moonscape, so that complete stand removal. You kind of see in that the bottom little picture where everything's been burnt out. We call that a moonscape because it kind of looks like a moon. That can be detrimental to wildlife depending on the size of your burn. If you're doing hundreds and thousands of acres that size, you're removing the home range for lots of species that can't move out. They're out of food and shelter. So we kind of want to do, you'd like the moonscape as a fire practitioner, because you don't have to worry about anything re-burning or lightning hitting that one green spot in the middle. But also as a wildlife person or biologist, ecologist, you want that mosaic, which you can see in the other picture. We have green patches. We have some areas that are completely burned out. Other areas that they're burned, they're brown. They'll shed their leaves eventually, but there's still structure for the different species to utilize. It's that patchy fuels that they like, habitat. So we try to pick our burn zones, the sizes. We'll maybe burn one zone in like adjacent to another, but it'll be a couple weeks, days, even months in a difference. So over across the landscape, we may have burned like a giant area, but at all together we didn't. We kind of pick and choose. So wildlife species has time to move as they need to. So the principal way that fire affects animals is it's altering the habitat. It's changed it. They woke up, it's all green, they go to bed, it's all black. It changes their cover, their habitat. There are those microhabitats with those little green patches that didn't burn, or areas that burned kind of kind of half burned. And they've learned to adapt. Something that people don't realize a lot of the time the questions that I've gotten is, we take all the food away. And it's what about the gopher tortoise? You took all the food away. Well, think about it, gopher tortoise can only eat like 6 inches off the ground. And if we don't burn, everything's out of its reach. So when we start to burn, it knocks everything back. They wait 5 days. And now all the grasses and forbs and the new shoots on the oaks and different hardwood species are within their reach. It definitely makes it easier for them to eat. So something you don't really think about, but I've seen it, and they definitely enjoy post-burn eating. And it's also, the forage is more nutritious as it's this fresh shoots. So for Sarasota County, and as far as every state agency that I'm aware of, we utilize the FNA natural communities typing. And Florida is divided into fire dependent, fire influenced, and non-fire type or non-fire dependent. And the big difference is fire dependent needs to burn. It to maintain its health, it needs to burn. The frequency is what determines, in Florida, it's a cool thing, frequency of fire and depth to the water table is what determines a different natural community type. That's what alters the soils just slightly, and that'll give you scrub versus sandhill versus a depression marsh. So those fire dependent, they depend on fire to maintain their health at a periodic frequency. Those fire influenced, those are the ones that are usually embedded within the matrix of a fire dependent community. So your marsh systems, your depression marsh, your basin swamps, you'll find them embedded within a fire dependent community, and they're influenced by fire, but they don't need to burn. So if it's wet one year, a fire moves through, they don't burn that year, but maybe the edges do. And then the next time it burns, it's dry season, so they do burn out. And as long as they're getting fire at some point within a decade or two, they're doing pretty good health wise. And then those non-fire dependents, those are the ones that fire isn't going to play an effect. And if it does, it's usually a negative impact. And they'll be on the outskirts of the fire dependent communities. So your hammocks, your floodplain swamps, mangrove swamps, fire will hit them because it's coming from those fire dependent communities, might push them back if they start to encroach into the upland areas. But if it's dry enough and a fire actually moves through like a hydric hammock or a floodplain swamp, there's going to be mass destruction as far as the canopy is concerned. And so we try not to put fire into them. We do try to push back the edges, especially in areas that haven't had fire or a frequent enough fire. So those non-fire areas will start to encroach, because again, that frequency of fire is what's determining the natural community type. And then this is real basic. You learn this in like your first fire class you take. The big things that affect fire, and this goes across for sure the US and I think across the world, is your fire triangle. You got fire, or you got you got weather, topography, and fuels. So your wind speed, wind direction, wind duration, your temperatures, your relative humidities, and then something that I have found is pretty important when trying to decide when to burn is your day since rain. Depending on the area you're burning, sandhill, you can get away. I've burned sand. I've been on a fire. It was raining. We did 650 acres of sand, beautiful sandhill. No problem. It burned perfectly. And then other areas, flatwoods, you're going to need to wait 2-3 days before you get an effective burn on it. So quick and dirty, because I'm sure there might be questions. So how we burn, it takes lots of training. I've been in, I counted earlier and I already forgot. I think it's about 40 classes I've taken, most of them federal classes. Do an annual work annual work pack test. I do the arduous pack test, so it's 3 miles, 45 pounds. You have 45 minutes to complete it, no running. And then there's the moderate, which is not required by every agency, but most of all state agencies require it for you to even be on prescribed fire. And that's, I think it's 22 miles. I don't do this one, so I don't remember how long it is. It's 2 miles, 30 minutes, I believe, and you have 25 pounds. I don't actually know, because I do the arduous, so I can go out on federal deployment. I'm federally red carded as a engine boss, firing boss, and qualified, not certified, as an incident commander type 4. What also was required in the state of Florida to do a prescribed fire is you need to have a prescription. I liken the prescription to the woods are sick, just like you're sick. You go to the doctor, he writes a prescription, you follow it, you get better. If you don't follow it, you either get sicker or continue to be sick. So as a practitioner, you go to your woods, they're somewhat sick, so you write a prescription on how you need that fire to move across the landscape to make the woods, the ecosystem healthier. And again, if you follow it, everything should go well, and you should have perfect, good response. If you don't follow it, it's usually when you end up with an escape burn and you are legally responsible for it. So the prescription is the law. So when you write it, you need to make sure you're writing it well. And we utilize specialized equipment and tools. A lot of the cool tools and equipment look familiar. We have ATVs, but they'll have these specialized water tanks or even fire pots on them, so you can actually burn off of them. We use drip torches and different types of engines and brush trucks, and even our hand tools they all have fancy names by whoever created them. You create a tool, you get it named after you. Seems to be the way of fire. And then a lot of interagency cooperation. So the picture that's clear, that's myself and my husband. He works for the state. I used to work for the state. We both met, ironically, in 2010 at a fire class, did not remember each other, became instructors for that fire class in 2016, and met and took a liking to each other and have been together since. So fire is definitely important to both of us now, even more so. But we were burning in that picture on the shared boundary between Carlton Reserve and Myakka River State Park. So the state park assisted with equipment that we needed and with personnel, and we were able to get it done safely and easily. Also on that fire, we had forestry out with one of their dozers as a backup, because we were burning the prairie, and the prairie likes to burn and can keep burning. And then in the background picture, that's my old property that I used to manage with fire. And I think there are each 4 people, I think are from 3 different state parks, because we didn't have the staff to do it ourselves. So we required assistance from other state agencies. And I also burned with the feds because we were within a matrix of federal property. And then I am opening it up to the floor for any burning questions.
Ah,
Little
all
punny, I
right.
know.
All right. That's awesome. Okay, so starting things off, we have William Lewis. He says, for scrub jays, is Sarasota County trying to create a mosaic of heights in burned scrub? How?
So unfortunately, I don't have any of the scrub jay properties, but I do work with those land managers. They are doing different mosaic heights. Sadly, those properties are deeply embedded in neighborhoods, so it restricts how much fire we can actually put in there. And they're smaller properties, so they do a lot of mechanical treatment, which will help knock it down to different heights, and then we will burn in smaller increments, and they'll do different mechanical treatments further away, and we'll take out any of the larger trees that are beautiful trees, but they're great perches for predator species, different hawks and owls and even eagles. So we will pull those down as per the land manager's discretion. I'm no expert in scrub jays, so I rely on them to tell me what to do, that land manager, because that's their forte.
Okay. Tom Heitzman asks, how many acres does Sarasota County burn each year?
Each year is different. The goal is to burn about 10,000 acres a year to maintain rotation. We have just about not quite 30,000 burn type acres, and going off, it's hard to make this determination, but we should be burning on a 1 to 3 year rotation. Some habitat types need longer, some need shorter. So 3-year rotation is like the average. So 10,000 should be what we're going for. This last year we fell short because of the drought, and then forestry wasn't allowing us to burn. But the previous year, in 2020, 2021, that fiscal year, we actually exceeded that, and I cannot recall the numbers, but we exceeded by a couple thousand acres. So roughly 10,000 is what we should be aiming for, which is a lot for one county.
I was going to say that I don't have anything to bounce that off of, but that sounds like a lot.
It is a lot, and especially with most of the properties that we have to burn are tiny. Tiny in the grand scheme of like ecosystem management. They're a couple hundred acres, and they're deeply embedded in urban areas. So we have to do like 2-acre burns at a time. So we did, I was part of, I think it was 37 or 38 burns just this past fiscal year. So October to October. And I wasn't on every burn. So we did a lot, but it was a lot of those hard to get burned. Even at Carlton, we didn't do a lot of big burns because we weren't allowed to by forestries, because they're the ones who authorize us to burn. But we did a lot of those little burns that we kind of skipped over because they were little, which are, I think, equally as important, because they were getting overgrown.
Yeah. And you said that they're, I was going to say, you said that they were close to urban areas, or
yeah, they were all on our boundary lines, or within we kind of utilized last year's wildfire as a somewhat break. I mean, it was already a year old, so it did catch again, but it was pretty interesting birds.
Oh, we'll get some more questions here. Okay, so we have Leah. She says, how do you expect Hurricane Ian will impact the county burn program?
Well, we're already missing burn days because we're all tied up with either the 2 mitigation people who are allowed to do pull authorizations for the county are stuck in EOC still. So they're not able to burn. We're all tied up with burning. We can't access, like I haven't even started looking at trails or fire breaks. So we don't even know if we can access burn zones yet. And then all that fuel, the big chunky fuel, is going to be sitting there, and that's going to cause a lot of smoke issues. So be patient, tell your neighbors and your friends that if they see smoke, we're trying, because we can't feasibly haul all of that down debris to the dump. It's expensive. It's kind of counterproductive that those trees will provide nutrients eventually when they break down. So I think, I'm not sure how it's going to affect this year. They're calling for a wet winter, so maybe we'll be able to burn, and those fuels will soak up enough moisture that they won't be a problem this year. They'll be a problem in 3 years.
Okay. We have Damon Moore. He says, what are the biggest threats to continuation and expansion of prescribed fire programs?
Air quality is the big one right now. For the state, it's shutting down. That's what's been shutting down a lot of our burn days, is if the air quality meets a certain index, we're not allowed to burn. And then I know Myaka hasn't quite done it yet, but we've gotten the push as a county because we're easier reach for the commission, where the state park, Tallahassee, is really far away still, but to cut our zone smaller. They, as in the general public, doesn't want to be inhibited by smoke. They don't want to see it. They don't want to smell it. But we try to tell people that it's going to burn. So you can have one day of being impacted by smoke via prescribed fire, or you can have up to weeks with a wildfire. Once it's a wildfire, obviously we don't have control of it. It is a wildfire. We do try to utilize wildfire and burn with it if we can. So we're not putting plow lines in through wetlands usually. So that will increase, but it's usually wildfires are large and they're harder to put out because you didn't have any control of when it was burning. So I think just getting the message out that smoke, it is a nuisance, but it'll be short term. So we try to get that out with Firefest. We've got that coming up in January, and I'm hoping I'm an IC now. I'm in incident command, so hopefully I can get everyone to like be on board and actually push that message across that fire is good. There can be bad fire, but we can still try to utilize it or stop it because we did good fire. So just education, I think.
On that note of Firefest, I was going to interject a question. Do you happen to know the date yet, or is it still
The 28th,
yay?
January 28th, 10 to 2. Hopefully we're dry by then.
10 to 2. Okay. Yeah. We'll be in touch. Okay. All right. So you hear that, everybody that's here, January 28th, 10 to 2.
Come as a vendor, come as a volunteer, or as a visitor.
Yeah. Our goal is to be active as a vendor to promote. Plant.
Okay. There
plant
should be,
technology.
if he hasn't already sent it out, he's supposed to be reaching out to everybody. We're trying to, you'll get a form and you're supposed to fill it. I've tried to make it a lot easier and smoother for everybody, for communications and all that jazz. So
Perfect.
once he just got to send the email out. But
Yeah. Tom Heitzman has another question. He says, what are the typical sizes of each burn? What's the smallest size you would do?
Ooh, that really is dependent on the property and the conditions. I'm trying to think the smallest burn I've ever been on. Definitely, I think half an acre. I mean, not counting like the Firefest, those little, like the little training burns, those don't count in my opinion. Probably half an acre was the smallest I've ever been on. Usually depending on like where that property is, the other like South Venice Lemon Bay Preserve, 2 acres, sometimes 5, because the problem is we have to put it out 100%. So if it's too big, it'll take way too much effort to put it out. We can't have any smoke visible. And then the largest I've been on was I don't remember. The one that's popping into my brain, there might have been bigger, was 5,900 acres. And that was at a camp landing. I never saw the fire. It was in the impact area. So where they would shoot all of their artillery and their different weapon thingies that they would do. It kept catching fire. So we got permission to just light it off to make it stop catching fire. And where I was at, we couldn't go into the area because it was the impact area. So it's EOD hadn't cleared it. So we just stood on the outside lighting it, and I never really saw the fire. It was so fast. It's pretty cool though.
That was so fun. And we have William Lewis. He says, how does Kogan grass respond to fire?
Very well.
Oh,
It grows back within like 3 days. And then so it's really easy to find because it's the first thing that pops up and it's that bright yellow green color. So you can come back after a fire and easily GPS all your Kogan grass areas. And then you want to wait till it's about 18 inches tall before you treat it. But we can GPS it. We have a new system that we utilize for tracking our exotics, which has made it easier to get our technicians out to treat.
Very cool.
yeah. Very cool. All right. Well, yeah, you snuck in the segue that I wanted to make sure I asked about the Firefest.
I know I meant to make a slide for it, but I accidentally deleted my presentation this morning, so I had to redo it this afternoon.
Oh yeah, no worries.
Um,
And we were chatting beforehand, and I was curious, and you had mentioned someone, if anybody here is interested in helping in like recouping from the Hurricane Ian, you had a name you recommended. It was Brenda, is it Canales?
Canales, yeah.
Yeah.
She's in charge of the volunteer groups and individuals, and then she sends them out to individual land managers for that property that they want to volunteer. But if you're as a group and you just want to generally help with different cleanups, I know on the Legacy Trail we had the Legacy Trail volunteer groups came out and helped us. They mainly did a lot of like the blowing and just keep the bicyclists out of our way while we're taking care of trees across the trail. And I know I have worked with some volunteers, that's right, on some of the other preserves. I'm trying to remember, but usually it's a lot of swamping, dragging limbs as we're cutting them. It's a lot of work.
Well, if anybody is interested, just feel free to reach out. I'll try to make a note for our next announcement that we have too. And then we have more questions. Allison Bishop, do they use drones with fires?
We don't. I know Florida Forest Service now has a few folks that are FFA approved. Because you have to have different licenses, because in order for them to be able to carry fire, they'd be really big. And they use what we call dragon eggs. They're like a paintball that is filled with PMNO4. I don't remember how to say it. Whatever that chemical is, promanganese, or something like that. Whatever. I remember the chemical numbers. PMNO4, and you inject it with ethylene glycol, and it catches on fire. So the drone will drop these little balls. It's similar to what we do when we use a helicopter to start fires. Those are ping pong balls, so they're bigger. And they drop them out. You program it. It's really cool. I saw a video on it about a year ago, but we haven't used them yet. It'd be awesome. I know they also use them for exotic spraying now too, which I just went to a conference and they were showing us videos of those. So it's the new way. We're not there yet.
Oh, wow. So
Yeah.
yeah, that's a crossover. So drones for fire, and you're saying also for spraying?
Yep, they'll spray it. You can program it in and it'll spray just that area with whatever you want it to spray. I would like a drone just to see how in some of our bigger zones, to get like into the middle, past like behind wetlands, to see if it burned. Usually I just have to wait for Google Earth to update to see how it went.
Yeah.
But I'd like one right now just to see what the trails look like.
Yeah.
Kind of survey some of those trails. They have their use. We're just not there yet.
And we have another question. By William Lewis. How well recognized or applied is Dr. Huffman's research on fire frequency?
I don't know. I know I've used her papers for my master's, lots of those classes, because we kind of got to pick our topics on our class papers. Of course, mine were generally on restoration and fire. I know I used her a lot. I'm sure that's where a lot of the information's from. I kind of, at this point, I'm just more of us looking at how the environment reacts to fire, and it's more practitionally used. I don't really look at the documents anymore. I've been doing it for a little bit, so it's just kind of like, okay, this burns like that. I'm still learning South Florida though. This is whenever they'll ask me like, hey, do you want to burn right now? Is this a good time? Because they will ask our opinion, the two mitigation folks. And I'm like, we don't, in North Florida, you don't burn from September to December. Like, it's just, you don't do it. It's bad for the pine trees, but the pine trees are different down here. They're the same species, but they just respond differently. So I'm still learning the idiosyncrasies for South Florida versus Central and North Florida.
All right. I just imagine it sounds like your job is a total joy in so many ways.
Most of the time,
Your smile, I saw in the pictures, and I just had like this vision of the people that do your job just loving their job.
Yeah, I didn't know that this was a job.
Yeah.
I went to school, I wanted to study wolves. I didn't even know I wanted to do that. I was originally going to school to be a vet, and I was watching either National Geographic or Discovery, and it was a documentary, and the guy had his name and it said wildlife biologist. I'm like, what is that? And University of Florida has the wildlife program, which I always wanted to be a gator anyway, so that worked out really well. And even after I graduated, I still didn't know what I wanted to do. It was camp landing means a lot to me because I got to dabble in a lot of different things. And I just kind of fell into fire there, and I never thought I wanted to play with fire. And yeah, most of the time I'm like, I'm getting paid right now. Or even at Talbot Islands, like of the 7 parks, 4 were beach parks, beautiful beach parks. If you've never been. And I'm like, people are coming here on their days off, and I'm getting paid to be here. So for the most part, it's pretty cool.
Very cool. Well, oh yes, Tom says very informative presentation. And I added my my new thing learned today was about the deer and the turkey. I had no idea that they ate the ash. So that's cool.
Yeah, you'll see them, they'll just come in just licking the dirt, and you're like, what are you doing? And then
Yeah.
it's the ash.
Damon Moore, he says, what you all are doing is the most important work that can be done to preserve plant diversity that us plant geeks love so much. Thank you. And Alison Bishop, she says, Florida Environmental Film Festival. Is there a Florida Environmental Film Festival?
Didn't know that.
I did not know that either.
Pretty interesting.
So yes, I really appreciate, I don't know if I didn't catch it at the beginning, but you went through a lot just to be here today, and I really appreciate you. I don't know if it was mentioned, but she was definitely heavily affected by Ian. So I hope your chickens. What was it? You had chickens and
rabbits.
And rabbits.
So we lost two chickens, sadly, but got 18 more.
Yeah, and you are actually at Myakka?
We live, the house is in Myakka State Park. Right now we're in an Airbnb because we can't be in the house.
Yes.
But
Okay.
it's part of it, job perks for my husband.
Yes, yes. And I appreciate you being here, and I thank you for what you do. And Allison Bishop followed up. She said, yes, it's a movie called Elemental on Fire. I will write that.
Seen that one.
Elemental on Fire.
Check that one out.
Yeah. And everybody else for taking the time to be here today. I appreciate you. Thank you. And Rachel, do we have any other information? I don't know. You guys are free to unmute. Regarding our upcoming presentation, like I said, we have our November 12th coffee and conversation. Leah's saying thank you so much. And well, I do have the, let's see. For our November, we have noteworthy plants of the Southwest, including rare and endemic species. Our guest speaker is going to be Jeff Weber.
That's a good guest speaker.
Yeah. So he's coming up in November. And I think we're good. So thank you.
You're welcome. Once it dries out and we can have a field trip, I'll let you know.
Yeah, that'd be awesome.
We'll miss the pretty fall flowers, but we can still go for a walk.
And I have a feeling we'll be seeing you for sure in January. I'll be there. I went last year. It was a total blast. It's fun for the whole family. And is that quite literally the pun intended? It's a blast, the Fire Fest. So, okay, guys. All right, we're good.
Thank you, guys.
All right.
Thank you so much, Megan.
Okay.